All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. This is Rosh, and you are watching FM9 Basics. So this is a video series I'm putting together to help users program the Fractal Audio Systems FM9 unit. This video series can, of course, be used in conjunction with my previous video series, FM3 Basics, as well as AxFX Basics. You can check them out at fm3basics.com and axfxbasics.com. So a little about myself. Once again, my name is Rosh, and I'm a guitar player and guitar tech out in the Los Angeles area. I build and program a lot of guitar rigs for a lot of different clients. Some of my clients include Steve Vai, Leppard, Etheridge, Perfect Circle, Bush, and more. And I wanted to give back to the Fractal community and show some of my approaches, tips, and tricks on how to program all the AxFX units, including the FM3, the FM9, the AxFX3, the FC12. All these strategies and tips that we're using can be used across all the different devices. So if you watch some of my previous video series, we may be, treading on old ground, but I also wanted to, make sure this video series was in-depth and, covers everything so that it can be a standalone series as well. So in this video, what we're going to cover is how to do gapless switching on the FM9. So if you watch other previous videos that I've made about gapless switching, I showed a couple different approaches. So we might retread some old ground, but I wanted to just show a couple of different methods on how to do that. So first off, let's build just a basic preset. So we'll do this quick build right here, and I'm going to demonstrate a couple things of what we're doing, and then we'll do an out block right here. And again, I'm going to click right here in this out and build a bunch of shunts to go to this output 1 block. And now what's going to happen is we have a full preset. Let's just call this gapless preset. All right. So whenever you're switching between amp sounds, so switching between channels, so for example, amp channel A to going to amp channel B, there's always going to be a small audio gap. Now, some people might have an issue with that. I personally don't. But if you need completely seamless switching, there are a couple different approaches on this. So as you can see right now, I'm just building, a basic preset that's going to switch between, two sounds. Okay, so we'll take this double verb. Let's just check this out. And then we'll do I don't know, some kind of crunch sound. So maybe we'll do the Brit 800. Let's just use a 412 cab for now. And again, this video isn't really going to be covering how to dial in a good tone or anything. So this is more just demonstration. So let's use we'll use, I don't know, this greenback cab. Let's check that out. Oops, I did not select the right cab. So let's use this, and then let's find that greenback cab, and we'll just use that one. Doesn't really matter which cabinet we're using, and we'll save it. All right, so when you switch between channel A and channel B on an amp block, there's always going to be this audio gap, as you can see. Okay, so let's make sure that they're also the tones are a little bit different. So as you can see, if we switch between these two channels, there's this audio gap. And again, I'm doing it on FM9 edit, so if you do it on the regular unit with a press of a foot switch, you're still going to notice an audio gap. It might be smaller, shorter. It really depends, but there is definitely a small audio gap. Personally, it doesn't bother me. I use amp channel switching all the time without any gapless switching, both live and in the studio, and I've never had an issue. But again, I understand that some users want completely gapless switching. So let's go over a couple different approaches, okay? So one thing that you can do is, just like the AxFX3, you can put 2 amp blocks in a preset. So if we either go to quick build, we can drag another amp right there, or we can just select on the grid another amp block, and then you have amp number 2. So for example, if we put amp number 2 here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to connect the 2 amps. So I built a shunt, and then I'm going to connect it back to this cabinet. So now what we're going to have is these two amps, switching between each other. Now we don't want both amps on to switch between the sounds. You can build really great tones of blending two different amps. There's a lot of very famous bands that, the guitar player or guitar players blend their amp sounds between two different amps to get their tone. But that's not going to be what we're covering in this video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Brit 800 channel, and I'm going to click here, and I'm going to copy this channel to the clipboard. And we're going to go to this amp number 2 block, and then I'm going to paste the clipboard to the current channel. So I'm going to click this amp block again and then go back to channel 1. So for example, if you look here, amp number 1, which is this amp, is the double verb, which is our clean amp. And then amp number 2 is the Brit 800, which is our dirty amp. Now, again, we don't want both of these on at the same time. We want like a clean and a dirty sound, let's say. So for example, in scene 1, we would have our clean sound. So what we'd want to do is, of course, turn off this amp and then keep this one on. And then in scene 2, we want dirty, let's say. Okay, so now let's configure both these amp blocks to do the correct thing. So first off, we want to make sure that they're both going to stay on channel A. So in scene 2, we want to make sure that each amp is still on channel A right there. So channel A, we're in scene 2. And then again in scene 1, we want them both on channel A. Now the next thing that we're going to want to do is, of course, we want to set the bypass mode right here for both amps to be mute. Okay? So again, make sure that both amplifiers, the bypass mode is mute on both. So here's what happens. If we bypass both amps right here, that means there's no signal coming through either amp. So I can strum my guitar and you're not going to hear anything. Okay? Any of the background noise obviously is my electric guitar being picked up by the microphone that I'm speaking in. But as you can hear, there's no amp signal going through. So in our clean sound, what we want is we want our clean amp, which is the double verb, on. And then when we go to the scene that's going to be our dirty sound, we want amp number 2 on and amp number 1 off. Okay? So if you watch me switch back and forth between these two scenes, you'll see that each amp is turning on and off simultaneously, right? They're almost flip-flopping. So this would be the same thing as like having a channel switching amp, right? So I'm going to hold a chord, and then you can I'll switch between them. So that's one method that you could do. And then what I'm going to do is, if you look at the unit, right now we are in this presets view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to layout number 8. And if you have something here and you're just following along with some of my other video series, you can of course clear that layout right here, or you can use any of your layouts. So what I'm going to do is, just to demonstrate, I'm going to make this a scene category, but instead of using the select function, I'm going to toggle. So this is almost like having a channel switching button like on any standard channel switching amp. So with the toggle function, we get to choose between scene 1 and then any other scene of our choice. In our case, we're trying to go from scene 1 to scene 2 back and forth by the press of the button. So we'll do scene 2. And then if you look down, what's going to happen is, because of this destination name, what it's telling you is that when you press the button, it's going to go to the dirty scene. And then if you are on the dirty scene, when you press this button, it's going to go to the clean scene. That can be a little confusing depending on what you're looking for. You can, of course, use some of the other functions right here, or you can do both. So you can see that there's going to be a little bracket between scene 2 and scene 1. Now, this both number thing, that is my preferred way to look at toggling between two scenes. So that little bracket at least indicates which scene I'm on. So if I go to scene 1, there it is. If I go to scene 2, you can see that bracket moving. And I'm just going to lean into the other camera, and you can see that if I press this, scene 1, and then scene 2. So you can see that it's switching. Now, of course, also on the actual preset itself, you can see that this should be channel A, sorry. And in our dirty, that should also be bypassed. Okay, so Let's make sure this is also happening. Okay, and then in our clean scene, we want to have that bypassed. So let's make sure we save that. Let's switch back and forth, make sure the scenes are working correctly. Awesome. And then I'll do that with the foot switch as well. Okay, and as you can see, as I step on the foot switch, it's toggling those 2 amps, the bypass state between both. Okay, so I'll hold a chord. And as you can hear, instead of the, using FM9 edit to switch between the 2 amps, right? Because the USB connection has to connect to your computer and then go back and send the signal to switch between both. As you can hear, when I press that foot switch, it's just completely seamless. So that is one method, of course, of toggling between 2 amp sounds. So the next method I want to show is what happens is also if you, we want to definitely stay on channel A here in both scenes. So let's just double check that. Okay, cool. So now, most guitar tones for clean and dirty, let's say, if you have 2 different types of guitar tones, they're also going to use 2 different cabinets. So you can, of course, use a second cabinet for your amp sound. So for example, I'm going to disconnect this shunt right here. Okay, so this is going to be the second method of toggling between 2 amp sounds. So in our clean sound, we have our double verb, which is our Fender Twin kind of sound. And then this time, let's pick a Fender Twin style cabinet. And in this cabinet, we'll use, we'll call this, what is it, double? Okay, so we'll use this. And again, this isn't really a tone video, but I'm just showing that this is the cabinet that would match up with the double verb. And in this cabinet up here, which is going to match up with our Marshall, our JCM 800, Brit 800 right here, we will do, let's do 412. We'll use the Brit 70s right here. And then now you see we have 2 separate amp paths as well as cabinet paths. So if you ever see any presets that I build, sometimes they are going to be something somewhat like this. So let's talk about how we get from clean to dirty. So this time, we want to make sure that all the amp blocks are on, okay? And then this time what we're going to do is we're going to toggle the signal path between this top signal, which again is our Brit 800 on channel A, as well as the matching cabinet. And then this is our double verb with its matching cabinet. So if we check, none of the channels are switching on any of these amps. And now Fractal made a really great function called the scene manager right here, and you can check which channel cabinets and other blocks are on depending on what scene you're on. So for example, amp 1, cab 1, and we'll select amp 2, cabinet 2. And as you can see, amp 1 is on channel A in both the clean and dirty scene, these 2 scenes right here. And the cabinet for cabinet 1, which is right here, it also remains on channel A. And then amplifier 2, which is this Brit 800 right here, is on channel A in both scenes. And then this cabinet 2 block is also on channel A in both scenes. Okay, so the scene manager is really useful to make sure that you're not switching any channels on any of your blocks. And again, if we had other effects in here, you can of course check which channel you're on. So, all right, so we'll close the scene manager, and then now what we want to do is toggle this signal path between these 2 signals. So on the clean signal, we want to think of just going through this signal path, and then when we go to the dirty scene, we want to follow this signal path right here. So there's a couple blocks that help route audio in your preset. So the first one is the mixer block right here. Now, what the mixer block allows you to do is it allows you to blend signal paths depending on what row you're on. So for example, if there was a shunt coming from here all the way down, that would be row number 1. This signal path coming from row number 2 going into the mixer block is controlled by this. And then this row right here, because it's on row number 3, is controlled by this knob. And then this is row number 4, if there was another signal going into there, row number 5, and row number 6. Okay, so for example, what you can do is you can zero out everything. And what we want to do is, for this clean sound, we want row number 3, because this is 1, 2, 3. We want row number 3 going through this mixer. So we will turn that all the way up. And as you can hear, it's the clean sound. And then if we wanted the dirty sound, which is this path right here, going up through there, that is coming down from row number 2. So for example, we would turn this knob up. Okay, so you can hear that these two knobs are determining which signal path is getting fed into the mixer. So in channel A of this mixer, we're going to stick that with the clean sound. So we'll have row number 3. And then in this scene, which is the dirty scene, we're going to switch to channel B on the mixer, and we're going to turn everything down. Now, you may be wondering, why am I turning down every knob even though we only have 2 signal paths? Just out of habit, and also it helps visually see which signal is actually being sent. So now that we're on scene 2, I'm going to channel B, and I have row number 2, which is this row, fed into the mixer. So really, both amps are on, but this is functioning almost like an A-B switch. So anybody who's ever used 2 amps before, if they have a setup that uses 2 dual amps, like you have a clean and a dirty amp, this is like an A-B box switching between both those amp signals. So again, we have our clean, and then we have our dirty. Now, again, if you look down at the bottom of the unit, or I'm sorry, the FM9 unit, scene 1 and 2, the switch, we've already programmed that in FC Edit, okay? And so I'm just gonna lean over and press that switch. Oops, what happened there? This got bypassed. Forgot to save it. Okay, so we'll save this. Make sure both amps are on. Okay, cool. So we'll save that. All right, now let's use the foot switch to toggle between these 2 sounds. We forgot to also change the channel right here on the mixer, so make sure we save that. All right, so let's toggle between these 2 amp sounds. So as you can hear, again, gapless switching. So I'm going to move this amp block down here. We're going to just take it off the signal path. Let's disconnect these. So now we're going to talk about method number 3. So there is another block in the Fractal called the Multiplexer Block. And it kind of functions like the mixer, but in a much easier way. So we're going to connect these back together. And instead of using the mixer to like faders on a real, analog mixer, what we can do is, of course, select which row is being fed into the mixer. So right here it says row 1. So that means any signal path coming from this row is being fed into there. So obviously if I play something, nothing's happening. Now if I select row 2, any signal path that's coming from row 2 will be fed there. In our case, it's the dirty sound. Now if we go to row 3, that's going to be the clean sound. If we go to row 4, there's nothing connected. So as you can hear, there is nothing being fed into that. So you can do the same thing as the mixer block. It's much easier using the multiplexer, but this is a relatively new block. Anybody who's been using, Fractal products for a very long time, we would use the mixer a lot to route audio, but the multiplexer block is just a much easier way to do it. So again, in our clean scene, we want to make sure that row number 3 is being fed through the multiplexer, because this is row 1, 2, and 3, which is this signal path. And then when we go to the dirty sound, we want to use a different channel in the multiplexer, in this case B, and we want to feed row number 2, which is this signal path, into the multiplexer. So again, scene 1 is row 3, this signal path, and then scene 2 is row 2. I'm sorry, channel B is row 2 being fed into the multiplexer. So again, we got channel A, row 3 is being fed through the multiplexer, which is our clean sound. And then we have channel B being fed into the multiplexer. And again, this is row number 2. Okay. So again, if we switch between both. Now again, if I press on the actual unit, there's going to be gapless switching. So here's clean. What happened there? We did not save. So we're going to save. Make sure that's saved. Let's double check the channel switching, and there we go. Let's save one more time, and then let's do this again. So as you can hear, there is gapless switching between these two amp blocks. So this is just one of many approaches to do gapless switching. Obviously, if you're using an amp that can also clean up and do all the kinds of things, you can also use that to get a clean and dirty sound. I would recommend watching the FM3 gapless switching video that I made that kind of details that. But because we have two amp blocks, you can do gapless switching much easier on the FM9 unit as opposed to the FM3. This is the same type of switching situation you would also do on the AXFX3. So I want to point out one last thing is that if you look at the CPU right here, you'll notice that even with one amp block, right, doesn't add that much CPU, as you can see. So adding the extra amp block isn't very CPU intensive because these both kind of use the same CPU power. So don't be afraid to use both amp blocks if you need the gapless switching. What's adding a lot more CPU processing, of course, is the cabinet block. As you can see, it jumps up about maybe 8 or 9%. So if you can find a cabinet that works for both a clean and dirty amp, that's a great way to save on CPU. So that's just one little final tip. So this would just be more akin to if you actually had a channel switching amp that had a clean sound and a dirty sound, you would always generally be plugged into the same cabinet as well. All right. So anyways, that's going to cover it for gapless switching for the FM9. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly or leave a comment below on any topics you would like to cover or you would like me to cover. And if you guys need any help or any one-on-one consultations or just getting some sounds dialed in or your units programmed, any of the Fractal products, by all means, feel free to reach out to me directly. Other than that, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you then.